I grew up in Ohio in the 70s, and me and my childhood friend Joe were outside all the time we could manage it. Joe lived on a farm that bordered a pretty big forest, and my parents would drop me off in the morning and we'd stay in the woods all weekend. We'd only come out for school. We loved pretending we were frontiersmen. We'd build shelters, traps, and practice making fires with sticks, with the whole 9 yards. When we got to be in high school, we got this notion to pull a Stand By Me. This was based on the movie of the same name that had just come out. The idea is that we'd talk on the railroad tracks out in the country, but instead of looking for a dead body, we'd find cool bridges to fish from and camp with a little ways off the tracks. Of course, we knew this was dangerous and we'd likely be trespassing, but we were kids. We had a lot of fun. We did find beautiful rivers, we discovered bridges no one went to, we fished, we hid from trains, and at night we'd camped in the woods just near the tracks and made small hidden fires. Nothing bad ever happened. It was idyllic. In fact, it was so fun we did it multiple times, never had a problem. After high school, me and Joe went our own ways. We both left home, but we always stayed in touch and always tried to coordinate visits so we could see each other occasionally. Well, one summer in the mid-90s, it worked out and we were both in town for about a week. We'd do stuff with the family in the day, and at night we'd either catch drinks at the bar or sit outside Joe's house around the fire and talk about the old days. One night, me and Joe got to talking about our Stand By Me trips. Well, nostalgia and beer are a hell of a mix. Soon we decided to take the day, walk the rails, and camp one night and walk home. The day came and we started out early in the morning. We had my wife drop us off in our old spot where we'd used to start, right outside our hometown. She thought this was absolutely crazy and made sure to mention it. When she pulled away, Joe suggested that instead of walking up the usual route, we take the opposite direction, just to be adventurous. We knew the land well, we had a map, so I gave the "what the hell," and off we set. The day went fine. It was fun, and a little sad, but in a good way. We found a bridge and sat on the edge, smoked a joint, and then moved on. We had no fishing gear, but we'd brought some canned food and other stuff. Before night started to set in, we picked a spot to camp. It was a thick forested area, trees on every side and train tracks so you'd feel like you were in a tunnel. We had brought small hammocks to sleep on, but before we set them up, we decided to do a little scouting of the perimeter. Now this is what we used to do in the old days too. We'd walk around the area a little bit to make sure we weren't in some dude's house just over the hill and we were actually camping in their yard. We walked maybe 100 feet or so into the woods on a small incline. We figured if we didn't see anything from the top of the short hill we'd be fine. But when we got to the top we saw an old building down at the bottom, about 100 yards into the woods. It was barely visible. We thought over what to do. We both assumed it was some sugar shack or something, because there didn't appear to be a clear road to it. From where we were, there didn't look to be anyone in it either. All was quiet. No movement could be seen, no lights. We decided to walk a little closer just to make sure. We came down on the hill very slowly, and as we neared the building, we saw it was no sugar shack at all. It was an old church. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. It was a squat, a sagging building whose wooden planks were almost black from the years of moss and rot. A cross could still be seen atop of the place, also withered black. None of the windows had glass in it, and there were no doors, just open doorways. We got close enough to see inside. There were rows of pews built on a section in front of the preachers to stand. We didn't want to go in all the way. We didn't want to. Beyond all that, there was no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no paths, no roads. It was an abandoned church. We left immediately and went back uphill to our spot that we'd picked to camp. Having a hill between us and the church made us feel better, but we were still a little uneasy. We chalked it up to natural creepiness. Seeing a church in the middle of the woods would be illicit. Besides, at this point it was dusk and we decided to rig up our hammocks and go to sleep and move on at the early morning. Night set in, and as we lay in our hammocks, we began to hear something in the direction of the church. Our conversation about went like this. "Do you hear that? What the fuck is that? It sounds like people singing." And it did sound just like singing. We both slid out of our hammocks and hunkered down, straining to hear more. We listened for a minute or two and the singing continued, but it wasn't getting louder. Finally, we decided to creep back up the hill and see if we could spy where the sound was coming from. We could still move very quietly in the woods from the old days. It was second nature to us. The moon was barely out, but it provided us with enough light so that we wouldn't just walk into a tree, but it was almost near pitch black. We didn't use flashlights as we crept slowly up the hill, and we didn't talk. When we got to the top, we saw a light in the distance. It was coming from the church, and the singing was coming from inside. Joe and I put our heads close together, had a hushed conversation that boiled down to, "Can you believe this?" The light looked like it could be candlelight from the way it flickered, and though we tried, we couldn't make out what was being sung. It sounded like church music, but in another language. We sat and watched for a while, trying to see who was in there, but we only saw the occasional shadows. We had no intention of getting closer either. We had about a football field length between us, and we aimed to keep it that way. The singing continued for a bit, and then it stopped. After that, a booming male voice began to chant. I was already freaked out, but this voice thoroughly scared the shit out of me. It sounded like some Old Testament preacher you'd see in the movies, but again, it was like he was speaking in a different language because we couldn't understand a single word. Eventually, it got to where a single male voice would say something and a bunch of voices would enter in song. This lasted for a while, and then they all broke out into this long, sustained wail that just kept getting louder. It got so loud, so disturbing that I covered my ears, and then it stopped. At the point, I was getting ready to say, "Let's just get the hell out of here," when Joe put his hand on my shoulder and hissed, "They're coming out!" We were far enough away that we couldn't make them out really well, but we could see the line of figures walk on an open doorway, all holding hands in single file. We could see some of them had flashlights, and they began to sing again, and the light from the flashlights began to move towards us up the hill. We booked it back down to our campsite, grabbed our stuff, and ran on the tracks. Once there, we ran down the tracks in the direction we had came from, and after a few minutes, we stopped and looked back. We saw the lights coming down the hill. They were moving erratically like whoever was holding them was shaking them down. We continued to run in spurts and walked as fast as we could. We eventually stopped seeing the lights, and we came into the road. Our map, we knew a small town was about 15 minutes down it, and we walked there, got to a 24-hour gas station, and called my wife to come get us. My wife and other friends all just thought it was kids messing around, but I heard those voices, and they sure as hell didn't sound like kids to me. Not sure who those people were, but it was definitely the creepiest thing that happened to me out in the woods.